The year is 2021. Aidan and his co-founders are trying to build a company in AI for video understanding in the midst of a global pandemic. They are battling against large technology incumbents like Google and Amazon, who are stockpiling up their video analysis capabilities. Some VCs are questioning how 12 Labs can stand up against the might of big tech. But this is not the first struggle the co-founders have been in together. Aidan and his co-founders were squad mates in the Korean military. Their experiences in the military gave them not only the skills they need to build 12 Labs, but more importantly, to build an inseparable bond between them. This deep trust forms a bedrock they fall back on when Aidan hatches a wild plan to build up 12 Labs' authority in AI for video. The IEEE ICCV VALUE challenge is coming up as one of the first video understanding competitions. If he can win this competition, he can prove why their team is truly differentiated from their competitors. But there's one catch. He has to go away from the young startup for 2 months to totally focus on winning the competition. His co-founders have such faith and trust in Aidan, they agree that he must win this competition to bolster the credentials of their startup. Aidan dives into a Rocky Balboa regimen, only coming by the startup once in a while to say hi and dives right back into his work. But he gains a deep mastery of video analysis, which informs his understanding years later. Against the odd, Aidan wins the competition, instilling confidence in customers and investors alike that 12 Labs has what it takes to build a truly groundbreaking product. Today, we dive into how 12 Labs is taking the field of video understanding into the future. Collective Nation, I'm your host, Thomas Joshi, machine learning researcher in the Stanford DSP Project for Large Language Models. My co-host for today is one Stephen Campbell, a co-founder of Revamp AI, a Y Combinator-backed data analytics and e-commerce company. Today, Stephen, Aidan, and I dive into innovations in AI for video and how to build a durable business in this space. Let's dive in. Welcome, Aidan, to the show. Can you please just start off by telling us about your work experience, why you chose those positions and what you're most proud of, and how that led to your current work?
Yeah, happy to be here. My name is Aidan, and I'm currently the co-founder and CTO at 12 Labs. And, my previous work experience, it comes from the military, the mandatory military experience that I, went through with our two of our co-founders, our CEO Jay and our chief architect XJ. So it's an interesting story. So I went to I had to go through mandatory training in Korea. All Korean men have to go through that, and I was lucky enough to go to Korean Cyber Command, which is like Israeli Unit 8200, and Jay was my superior, direct superior, and he was a squad mate, and SJ was Jay's superior. So we had this 3-level hierarchy where we met our co-founders, and at the time, our mission was to kind of analyze the videos or contents in the internet related to North Korea. And, at that time, there were no, there were frameworks that analyzed text like Elasticsearch, but there wasn't any for videos. And, that's how we got the motivation and started 12 Labs. And one of the proudest thing that I did while I was at 12 Labs was, back in 2021 when we first started, our co-founders didn't really come from the traditional academia or traditional academia background. We had a great vision and we had a great demo, and we went through TechStars Seattle, but we still didn't have the I would say traditional pedigree, and that's when I told our co-founders that I'll be out for 2 months. And I will participate in this competition called ICCV VALUE Challenge. It's very prestigious, hosted by a very renowned professor. And I was lucky enough to win that competition, and he got that credibility, and that's how we kind of built the technology. Started from there. So I would say that's one of the most proudest achievement that I had while I was at 12 Labs so far.
It's really interesting that for early stage founders, the biggest thing people say to recruiting is, the market, but then also the team, because essentially you may not have product market fit yet, and you all have benefit from a phenomenal story that you're bonded through this military experience, which is pretty rich and connects you all in a real way. So that's a really incredible story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, we literally like slept in the same barack for 2 years. So we know how, you know, this person will react, or like how what it looks like to work together, right? So yeah, I think that deep chemistry, that deep connection really helped us go through some of the early times of 12 Labs when we just started. You know, we started when COVID like was at the worst time, and we had to go through TechStars Seattle in a remote environment, all those stuff. You know, I think it all ties back to our deep connection together while we were at the military.
Wow, I mean,
that's awesome. I just wanted to say I can definitely relate to at least the living conditions with your co-founder. So my co-founder Amin and I had to share a studio apartment in San Francisco for a few months. So definitely not military service, but that's one of the most interesting founder meeting stories I've ever heard. That's a new one, meeting in the military. I've yet to encounter that yet. I don't know if you have, Thomas, but I certainly have not.
No, I have, and I recently heard a quote that for startups don't fail, they quit. Which, you know, maybe is not a totally accurate, but like the point is like you need to be very determined and know that these are the ride or die people you're gonna sort of go together with, and that's incredible. You have that bond with each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So we start off every event from our 200-person summits to the 20-person discussions, like our event actually at 12 Labs, with an icebreaker to get to know people on a more personal level. And so our icebreaker today is, if you could teach a course on any one of your side hobbies, so not 12 Labs, not work related, what would it be, and how would you structure the curriculum?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I've been married to 12 Labs for the last 3 to 4 years. So let's see. I love watching European football. They call it football in Europe. So I love watching European football, and I'm a deep Liverpool fan. It's one of the European clubs there, and I would like to teach a person how to watch these, how to enjoy watching these European football, because I really love it, right? And my tactic would be, if you first watch, I think the first, way of getting engaged to sports is because you get really impressed with the atmosphere, the amazing tactics, all these visual things, or the fans around, or the players, right? So I will first take the person to the most famous stadiums in the world, like Champions League, or like Champions Game, or stadiums like Anfield, Santiago Bernabeu in Spain, to let the person kind of get engaged to the maximum atmosphere they will be able to feel, and also the fans and the players around it. And then, I think at the end, watching sports is, I think, about like understanding the storyline and the history of each team, right? So I would kind of gently introduce some of the background and history of each teams and the rivalries across different teams, and then eventually take this person to become a Liverpool fan. So yeah, that would be the curriculum that I would probably build to be this person of a football fan.
It's funny because you say it, because I think what Americans often complain about is, okay, soccer, football, we'll call it football for now on the podcast. Football is boring, but I think what the contrasting opinion is, but when they score a goal, the build up to that is so electric, that's what makes it exciting. Right. So what I often recommend to people is to watch hockey. This is something that I didn't grow up with and just got into recently, but it has the constant action of basketball. It has the kind of the physicality of football, and then it has, when a goal is scored, just that excitement that you get with soccer. So I think I'm kind of a growing hockey fan.
Yeah, I never watched hockey before, but I would love to. I had the moment with basketball. Constant scoring and the movement. So yeah, I would definitely want to watch hockey.
Great. Yeah. So thank you for letting us get a little insight into who you are outside of work. Would love to dive into your insights into AI and from your experience at 12 Labs and prior to that. So maybe we'll just start by retracing our steps, and if you could just talk about like what inspired you to venture into the field of AI, right? And like how did that experience in the Ministry of Defense, shape your approach? Because what I've seen is that the way you get into AI will change the work you do from that point forwards. So I think a lot of people who get into AI maybe for an analytical reason will can kind of continue in AI more along the lines of probability and statistics, and maybe someone who came in because they were really interested in sort of robot process automation, they'll go more into NLP side of the business. So yeah, curious to see how being in that role shaped your approach now.
Yeah, so for me, I was generally excited about the technology, right? I first got into AI, I think in 2015 or 16. That's when the first boom of CNN type of computer vision applications came out, and I originally wanted to do a PhD in AI. So just like any students, I applied for like research labs and did some research while I was in college. And at that time I was mostly focused on computer vision, particularly like modeling, making good models, right? But my experience, when I joined the military, my view kind of changed. It's just not about modeling; it's also about like the systems around it. So I began to think about AI as a systems, like ML in production systems, not just the modeling, right? Because we had an actual user, our internal users, that wanted to use the AI or leverage the AI in the way that they want to. And the system has to be constant, and of course the model has to be certain performance, right? So that's I think that kind of moment is when I kind of transitioned my view from like traditional, I would say like lab, research lab type of modeling to like expanding to actual ML in production kind of systems view, and also kind of gave me a way to get the motivation of doing research in video understanding.
Yeah. I think that's a very common experience that people happens to people, particularly when they go to college and they study CS. Like you get into it wanting to know like every little detail of the CNN, and then you kind of expand when you get into the real world and you see that that was like 1% of all the problems that you'll need to solve. But I also think that there's people will often kind of say, oh, you're just a student, you focus too much on the model and building out the biggest model you possibly can. That's not what really matters. When in reality, like having that curiosity in the details of the model is really important early on in your career, and then you can, once you've kind of mastered the fundamentals, you can understand like later down the road how that will integrate into a larger system. So I totally agree that although at first it happened to me as well, like was really into the modeling side, and then you realize there's all these kind of system problems that come about later down the road.
I'm curious, Aidan, when you were kind of thinking about the model and these systems, was your ICP in the the earliest days of 12 Labs, before it was even 12 Labs, was your ICP the military or fellow soldiers in this unit who were parsing through video? Like was that the genesis for who you were building this for?
No, actually. So that's the interesting part. So we didn't build anything related to video understanding for the military, or like while we stayed in the military. We just had the motivation and ideas during that time, and we just thought like, okay, we were thinking in a way in our shoes that okay, we are developers that want to build some analytics on top of videos, but there aren't any frameworks out there that could do that, right? So if I were like another developer, I would probably want this technology or framework available. So we were mostly thinking in not just for the military, but actually in the shoes of the developers who in the future would want to use some content or do analytics on top of videos. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So one thing I was curious about is that 12 Labs investors include NVIDIA, Intel, and Samsung. And that's an interesting partnership. So what role moving forward do you see the partnership between AI companies and AI chip manufacturers having in AI product development?
Yeah, I think we see lots of news about like GPU capacity being the problem, and it's true, right? It's a real problem right now. Only a handful of companies can access to large clusters for training, right? And for AI chip makers, I think they have two roles regarding like AI. Like, it's obvious, but like there's the training part and there's the inference part, right? And to be honest, for now, training part mostly comes from, I would say, the cloud partnership, because the cloud providers actually host these chips, and also around the infrastructure around it. So for us, the chip makers actually would, I think in the future would, its role would be more geared toward like optimized inference. So for example, we have a model that we built, and if we want to optimize it to the system level and make the inference faster and video processing faster, then that's where the chip makers could really we can partner with and provide more cost efficient and more faster inference. So I would say our chip makers would have that. We envision that partnership in the future with the chip makers.
So then, if you could talk about some firms, some companies would focus on optimizing that inference. Some firms are like there's different ways to attack the problem of sort of video understanding infrastructure. Like, could you maybe elaborate on what 12 Labs vision is and on how to revolutionize video understanding infrastructure? And I kind of draw it out like there's the operating system level here, the application layer here. You're not playing the hardware level, so but there is like FPGA companies that are playing at this level. So, but maybe just like maybe talking up here in the stack, like what's the vision of how this will look different after 12 Labs takes over the world?
Yeah, so we want to be that GPT layer for video understanding, right? So it's like, so I right now video constitutes 80% of the world's data, and if you look at the trend, companies have to deal with videos anyways, because there are so many contents generated with videos now, and we think there could be a huge opportunity there, because right now all these video assets are just lying in the data center, and we want to be in that layer where we build both the foundation model that can really understand the video and also the system around that foundation model that best serves that best serves that model, right? So if you look at OpenAI, for example, what's impressive is there, like when you look at it closely, there's the GPT, there's the model part, the GPT part, but there's also that turbo part, right? GPT turbo that really makes the system fast and scalable to be accessible to the developers, and they do both, right? And I think that's what makes the key technology mode for them. And for us, I think we envision the same for video understanding, right? There's the model part that we obviously have to innovate, but there's also the systems around that model, because video processing and processing infrastructure is so hard. So yeah, I would say we're in that layer where we build both the system and the model to make video understanding accessible to all the developers around the world.
And is there something that you think, so 90% of competitors try to solve the problem this way, we try to solve the problem in Y way? If you could kind of put it in those terms, how would you say it?
Yeah, so like traditional like video analysis were based on, I would say, image understanding. So for example, you take each frame and you run these image detection kind of models, and you kind of combine the results into into a single JSON file that kind of maps the timestamps to the model's results, right?
Right now, I feel like you're coming after me because I've done this before. Yeah, sorry. Okay, continue.
No, I think it was the only way, I would say. It was the most best solution at that time. But I think the next wave would be to really interact videos like how we interact with text now. So based on free text form, user could just write a prompt to analyze video, and it generates text, or it do search or do classification. All these things based on free form text, not predefined classes or individual frame level analysis. So I would say that's the technology, and that we are looking to innovate and democratize.
And I think when I was kind of doing those frame by frame analyses, like I think it felt painful. It felt weird that you basically, you're condensing down, you're trying to use image analysis techniques that we'd kind of developed as a community over, whatever, 2 decades or even longer. And then you're trying to take those same techniques that were tried and true and apply it to video understanding. And I remember it felt super weird, sending a video to a transcription service, getting the transcript back, and then running NLP on the transcript itself, as opposed to kind of treating the video analysis as one integrated unit, which is what really it is. And and so that's why it's kind of, I totally see the problem that you're highlighting there.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the multimodal component part, right, of videos, right? Because video itself has both the frames and audio and conversation that's happening at the same time. If you treat it separately, I think there are use cases that could be powered by that scenario, but there are like lots of use cases that you're also missing out, right? So for example, if you want to generate like a text to describe our current situation, our current moment, then if you just look at the text, it will be mostly focusing on the contents of the podcast, but not recognize that 3 people are doing it in this podcast, right? So more comprehensive text will be 3 men doing an interview about startup experience or founding experience of AI, right? So AI company. So yeah, that's the example that I would give you.
That's awesome. I'd love to talk about use cases a little more deeply. So read that 12 Labs recently released this. You all had a huge release, right? It was this big suite of new video to text APIs, including your Gist API, Summary API, and the Generate API. Curious, how do you prioritize this multitude of new use cases you could support over each other? Like, what's that prioritization process like? And then how does that get prioritized against doubling down and improving on your existing offerings?
Right. So yeah, 12 Labs is still an early stage company. We're still want to understand the market more as we build the market category. And we want to engage with users that help us learn actually and iterate of our model and our technology more, right? So I guess there are market where we would really want to go, but we can't learn that much because of XYZ reasons. And there are customers who are willing to engage with us to actually build the experience and the model together, right? So we prioritize those customers and use case more than others. And based on that learning, what we have learned is so we right now have 2 different types of APIs. One is embedding based API, I would say, which is powered by our Marengo engine, like search and classify. And the newly released model are generative APIs, where it generates text from videos, right? And the way we see it is those 2 API endpoints are complementary. So the request actually came from our search API customers, that they want to understand some of the videos without having to look at them, right? And if they have some idea, then they come with inspirations to come up with different search queries and start searching through videos. And when they search through it, they find this video and they want auto text generated for that video. So these 2 product lineups are complementary, and actually came from our users asking for that feature. And we always want to iterate based on those user feedback.
So you talked about kind of the external facing stakeholders, like users, but maybe we can start turning to the internal stakeholders. Leading a diverse team of AI scientists, engineers, designers. Like, how do you foster innovation collaboration within 12 Labs? I think this is a topic that's come up a lot on past interviews, which is that AI seems to take like really differing backgrounds, from statisticians to systems people, whereas maybe if you're building kind of Web 2.0, more social network, it was really all about like you have your front end people, maybe someone doing like your back end web stack, and then like maybe some systems people, like maybe like a 3-tier attack. But it just seems like there's just way more needed for the interworkings of an AI team.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that I also had to went through lots of learnings to understand and make sure that this diverse team is looking at the same vision. And one of the things that I noticed is oftentimes AI companies can become a research like a research lab, and I think one of the reasons is because research, if you have research scientists, they usually have lots of ideas, right? That they can, and lots of crazy ideas that they will want to experiment and see it happening, right? So I think the key for us was to make sure that the research scientists and engineers and designers, they look at the same vision and emphasize the kind of the principle that the modeling itself cannot just become the product. It has to be a collaboration between the engineers making the systems and designers making the interface for that model, and that's when it becomes a product, right? So trying to emphasizing that principle, and also our vision to make video understanding accessible to the developers is, I think, what kind of gave us as a lighthouse for the entire team to be looking at, right? Yeah, it's a hard question, and it's something that we're still, I think every AI companies are trying to figure out.
But I think something that you brought up, which is this idea of AI companies turning into sort of research labs, is like a key issue that AI companies have that Web 2.0 companies didn't have, which is the non-determinism of being an AI company. So if you were, kind of building a web stack, you knew you could build, the database, you could build, or not build from scratch, but like you could implement the database, you could implement, some features into your website. Whereas with, an AI company, sometimes you don't know what will get you to 90% plus accuracy, and you have to tweak and play around with new techniques. Something you randomly read in a paper, maybe that'll work, and then you run all these experiments, and then you pick which one will, which one works. So I think you highlight an interesting facet about AI companies there.
Yeah, and I think the key for AI companies to make that iteration faster, right? So you don't know, for example, if you're building a foundation model company, then you don't know what's going to make that 90% accuracy for certain domain, unless you do the experiments. And I think there could be like 10 different ways or 20 different candidates or way to achieve that. And I think the key here is how to make that 20 experiments iterate fast and deploy and make it deployable fast. Make it deployed fast when the experiment results come out. So yeah, I guess that's like the key for the companies.
That makes sense. I think if there's one thing I would hope all three of us would agree on, that also is important to AI companies, is just the absolute need for data, right? It's the new oil. We saw that you all recently released Pegasus 1, which has one of the largest video to text pair training data sets with over 35 million pairs. Curious for you all, like, what are some of the challenges with sourcing training data at this scale? And then to what extent has the amount of data you had, maybe it's a lack of data, been a bottleneck? Has it been a bottleneck throughout 12 labs so far?
Yeah, I think for videos, I think there weren't any like large scale public data out there. Even now, if you look at image, you have Common Crawl. I mean text. If you look at text, you have Common Crawl, and there are a bunch of public data set out there. Leon, they release like large scale image data for the public, like the sources. But for videos, there aren't that large scale, like I would say a few 100 million or billion level source of videos that people can, or ML scientists can interact with. So for us, obviously the sourcing part was the first issue. So collecting or finding videos that can be used for training was our first step of our data engine. And that was the #1 priority that we had when we started building technology. And the second part will be the infrastructure to process them, right? For text and image, I would say the compute and storage required to process them are very small compared to videos where we have to decode things and make audio out of it, and save them all somewhere with huge storage. So both there are two different challenges there, right? The sourcing part and also the processing part that requires huge infrastructure.
Gotcha. And what have been like some key takeaways on solving those? Obviously, don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but just curious if you have any perspective there.
I mean, yeah, like, for us, like, for example, the infrastructure part is because we're building our indexing system, video processing pipeline for the users. We could use the same processing pipeline for internal purposes to process this video, right? So that's been a huge, I think, move for us to really able to process large scale videos and large video data set, and just continually iterating and building the team around it to make that happen was kind of the key, and still working on that part a lot.
That's awesome that you all like dog food, customer facing products as well. That's great.
Yeah.
So we kind of briefly touched upon like what's the secret sauce. Like maybe we could come at understanding what is unique to your experience, kind of going back to that formative experience. Winning the IEEE challenge. Like, what can you share insights of how that changed you or influenced your work at 12 Labs? And I'll give you an example. Kind of studying electrical. So I was on a project to do like screening for heart disease, and a significant component of that work was informed by studying electrical engineering and studying signals and systems. So if I hadn't studied signals and systems, I wouldn't know how to solve challenges in heart disease, because a lot of the sort of predominant research in that work was using convolutional neural networks. Like, is there experiences like that you had, or key points of lessons that then inform your differing perspective on sort of video understanding infrastructure?
Yeah. So, I think for the challenge, I think I mentioned that, I asked the team if I can just use 2 months to participate in the challenge and, not come to I didn't even go to the office for 2 months. So, yeah.
What was the conversation like? Like, walk us through, because so there's a funny story of like Bill Gates and Paul Allen. I think one of the Apollo missions, they're sending, man to the moon, and Paul Allen is like a big sci-fi head. He really wants to go and see this historic moment, and Bill Gates is like livid that Paul would ever try to think about anything other than Microsoft. And so Paul goes off without telling Bill. They have a deadline to hit. Bill Gates just like stays up, for days, hits the deadline. But like the story highlights like how do you work with a co-founder and navigating a sort of outside interests, or curious how you thought and talked through that.
Yeah. So that's trying to remember that scene. So I found this competition happening. I was just reading through some of the posts and papers, and I knew that this competition is going to happen. It was literally the first competition for video language understanding that's happening in ICCV. So I told Jay that our CEO, that if we could win this, it's going to be huge for us and give us lots of credibility to the outside people. And Jay asked me, let's do it. But then without any hesitant. But I said, then I need 2 months off, just working. Because right at that moment, like we had only I think 8 people in the team, and I was like literally the only person who was building the model for our product, and I'm basically asking to leave the company for 2 months to just focus on the competition, right, and not work on the product, right? So it was a huge bet for us, but I asked him transparently that what I need in order to think I can win the competition. And Jay said let's do it, that he will do his best to make sure that the company is still running for after 2 months, and still iterate the product development. So yeah, for literally 2 months, I didn't really go to the office. I think I went to the office like once every 2 weeks, just to make sure that I'm live. And that's how that's the moment where I really had the time to focus deeply and understand deeply about this technology, right? I mean, I had some ideas, and because there are so many things going on around when you build a startup. I don't think I didn't have any time to really go deeply into the technology. Beginning of 12 Labs, but for that two months, I was able to really deeply dive into the technology and build it from the scratch, right? So yeah, it kind of gave me some insights on how the technology should be developed and what are some key challenges and areas that need to be solved in order to make it into the production. But the competition is also a time crunch, right? There are long-term both ideas that you want to do, but because of the time limit, sometimes you cannot do that during the competition, right? So I took kind of memos of those things that I want to do after the competition, and we started developing some of those ideas after that, and that's how kind of we started and iterated the technology process from then.
That's awesome. I know my co-founder and I have had some pretty frank discussions about should one of us go to a conference, but that's for like 2 or 3 days. Interesting to see that blown up to the month scale. Definitely respect the courage in yourself to take off those 2 months, because we would be having a very different discussion between the three of us had you done that and not won the competition, right? So that's awesome. I guess we'll never know what would happen though, right? It's a good thing.
Well, actually, you bring up a great point, which is, okay, so two things. One is, if you haven't read Deep Work by Cal Newport, highly recommend it. And he basically outlines the exact same thing that you just talked about, which is in order to achieve phenomenal, great, extraordinary results, you oftentimes, particularly with hard skills, have to go into a period of self-isolation where you are solely and totally absorbed into the edge of your work. And so when you emerge from that, then you can piece together ideas that you didn't see before because you're totally focused on execution. And I totally see what you are referring to, which is how it informed the work you do now. How did you think about convincing yourself? Because I would love to just take kind of go into myself and just hardcore focus without any without much interaction and just kind of study the landscape and think deeply about the problem. Like, is there some sort of framework that you use to talk yourself through that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think at the time I had a framework to do that, but I had a big motivation at that time, because one of the before we won the competition, like one of the things that we heard a lot from the VCs were, how does your technology compare to Google, or how do you compare yourself to I think like Facebook at that time, and what they were really asking is are you we don't trust your technology, or you don't have the credibility, right? So that really struck me a lot, and I just felt the responsibility that because we don't come from that traditional background, we were getting these responses. Like, it would have been different if we were I would say top AI professors or top people in the academia, but that was the reality, right? And I really wanted to the team that we had, I really want to make sure that they are not getting treated differently because of that, because they're not coming from this different background. And that gave me a huge motivation, really, just to do whatever it takes to kind of win the competition at that time.
That's an incredible story. I mean, it's like, it's like chip on your shoulder, Tom Brady, 6th round draft pick, you come from behind, you win the competition. Like, that's wow. And it's really, it sounds like it's kind of like, back to the wall. Like, if you can win this competition, you can give the credibility and solidity to investors, to customers, that you do know what you're talking about, and that you are different from your competitors. So it really is like this necessity you have to prove yourself, which is just an incredible story.
Yeah, and at that time, I just felt that need of, the motivation really came from the outsiders, how they talk about our technology, and it's actually user feedback, right, basically, right? And we wanted to address that, and I think at that time, I think the only way was to win that competition. So we were lucky enough to I think win it and get to this point. I mean, we would have done other things if we weren't able to win it, but I think that's how it turned out after it.
I'm curious about this competition being a forcing function in and of itself. For pushing development forward, right? You probably got more done in those 2 months than a 20-person engineering team might get done in a year at like a typical FANG company, right? I know Thomas and I can kind of relate to that. So I'm curious, how do you keep that momentum moving forward for product development, for just focus on the technology? Like what motivates you today? Where do you draw on today to like continue doing amazing work?
Yeah, I think the team gets the motivation from I think it's cliche, but really the user feedback kind of keeps the momentum. I think we were lucky enough to be one of the first player in this market and get lots of really good feedback from the users. And there are questions that researchers or in the academia that they don't ask, that user asks, and in order to address those concerns or problems, we have to come up with new solution or brainstorm new ideas, right? It's like when I thought about it, it's like if you look at GPT-3, like in 2020, it didn't work as good as the current ChatGPT, right? But they were able to gather all these user feedback, things that didn't work at that time, and kind of have a internal goal to make them work. And eventually InstructGPT came out, like ChatGPT came out, and so forth, right? And for us, we see that similar in video understanding, and we receive all these user feedback, screaming at us, make this better, and we want to solve this problem. And I think that kind of gives both like the engineering team and the research team a clear goal to solve, while being versatile, making the model versatile to other tasks. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so if you could think about from that initial competition to today, we outlined some techniques that were used before, like using image analysis on image frames. How else have you seen sort of AI and machine learning technologies evolve over the years, especially in the context of video analysis, or just in general, if you want to? I mean, obviously, like transformers, but if we could go a little bit deeper into kind of video analysis, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, I think for not just video understanding, but I think the first wave was of after transformers, the first wave of foundation models were in text, right? 2018, BERT came out. People kind of think that embedding-based text tasks are now kind of solved. And in 2021, or 22, like ChatGPT came out, and that's when generative tasks for text data is kind of being solved, right? And then we see a similar trend happening to image now. Clip model came out in 2021, and after 3 years or 2 years, DeepMind's Flamingo or OpenAI's GPT-4V now shows that image generative model, and Stability AI can be there are foundation models coming out for images now, right? So I think the next trend will be videos, right? And because we saw this order of the embedding model coming first, and then the generative model for text, and then for images, now for videos, I think that's how the technology is going to develop in terms for AI, and especially for videos. So we also announced our video generative model, but I think there will be other players that will be announcing their own video language model or video embedding models, just like how it did for image and text. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think one thing I'm curious about too for you all with this kind of new space, right, is that customer success is an interesting problem to solve. And I think you've touched on it briefly kind of throughout this conversation in terms of the importance of what I would call design partners for use cases,
Yeah.
and customer feedback being such a strong motivator for your team and for developing new features. I'm curious, like, what are some of the struggles with customer success in a new category? Like, this is definitely interesting. Is there a lot of hand holding? Are they holding your hands and dragging you in a direction? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think selecting the right design partners is extremely important because it really kind of guides you how the technology should be developed and how the product should be developed. And obviously, we went through lots of iterations as well. But I think it's one of the hard thing about creating a new market category is that there's no playbook, right? There's no playbook for us to follow, so we usually have to come up with our own solution to solve that user feedback, right? But here, a solution is not just like product, but also like core technology and research to actually solve that feedback, right? So I would say categorizing these user feedback into certain buckets in a way that our technology can solve them simultaneously is something that was very important. That's very important for us. And among these big buckets, like prioritizing which to tackle first is really important for our modeling team to iterate to make sure that we don't solve too narrow problem. Especially given that we are like a foundation model pair, and solve something big enough that could solve lots of big problems at once.
And if you would go back to your younger self, given all the lessons that you've learned now, what advice would you have for aspiring AI professionals? A couple years ago, you're doubted from customers, or you're doubted from VCs, but you have this inner self-confidence that you can really change the way people view video understanding. Like, do you have advice that younger self on trying to make a mark in the field of AI and machine learning, like a lot of the listeners are trying to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I would still, run for the competition. You have to, give yourself some credibility and for your self-confidence, right? It will give you credibility, but it will give you some confidence that you can compete with these top institutions and top competitors, researchers around the world, when you actually participate and trying to win the challenge. So for people like like me, or people who doesn't have the traditional academic background, I would highly encourage to participate in the competition, and also like contribute to some of the core open source model projects. Especially, I think one of the movement that we see right now is a company, for example, company announces certain model, but open source community kind of tries to reproduce that to have a similar performance. So contributing to that process would also give you some ideas on how the technology works, what are some requirements, and what should I do in the future. So
it's incredible. You talk about open source. I mean, if you're a younger engineer, that is the way to ramp up your learning curve, because I mean, imagine if oftentimes the people who contribute to open source communities are some of the best engineers at phenomenal institutions that just need to tweak the open source software for their own needs, and they'll add a library to say, okay, like this is what I need for my own personal use cases. So what you end up getting is like some of the best engineers in the entire world giving away their work for free, and it's like a painter showing you, hey, this is how I produce my masterpiece. Like, this is the abstractions I had. This is the, in the case of programming, like these are the methods I thought about. Because there'll be comments that'll walk you through for some new engineer, like how they built the thing and what the rationale is behind every decision. And then there'll be reviews, and there'll be like issues that are opened up, and they'll defend the thesis on why they designed it in such a certain way. So like open source, contributing open source software is such a hack to ramping up and developing this high quality skills and being around people who are better than you.
Definitely.
And I don't think the scale of the project that you do matters, right? It can be a very small, like if you're building like, I don't know, like a GPT-3 open source, it doesn't matter if you're in the core part of the modeling or if you're core part of the data, or it doesn't matter what the component that you own. I think what matters is that you're taking that ownership of that component, and you make sure you think deeply to make the best out of that component, and address all the issues that come out of that component when it gets plugged into or gets structured into a bigger component, right? And I think that's what's important, and you learn a lot from that.
Definitely. I think one thing I wish I had done earlier in my career is contribute more to open source projects. So I think that's fantastic advice. Fantastic advice for aspiring engineers and entrepreneurs. Any advice more on the business side? Definitely curious on your thoughts there. I think that's fantastic for engineers, but any entrepreneurial words of wisdom you wish you could have told yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first of all, the team is like the #1 thing for entrepreneurs. Like having a really strong, doesn't mean that like everyone needs to be like superstars, but like really a tight, I think, community tight team, deeply connected team is super important to go through the hardships. The second part would be, I mean, we also did lots of like iterations of how we should develop our technology or what the overall company mission should be, especially in TechStars Seattle Accelerator. We literally had to so we came up with and I'm not sure if you're aware of Lean Canvas, but that's something that we learned when we attended the accelerator. But we had to come up with like 2 to 3 Lean Canvases every week.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of Lean Canvases.
So when we first joined this TechStars Seattle, we had a demo, but we didn't know how this is going to turn out. So we didn't have any product. We just had a demo of our technology. So it could have taken us to anywhere. And one of the key KPIs that we set to ourselves was, okay, let's come up with all the business ideas that could come out of this technology, and let's try to create 3 Lean Canvases every week. And then we did that for 3 months, and we came up with like really a lot of Lean Canvases. And once we had that, we were able to kind of like imagine what each path would be, and eventually like converge like to what the founders and what the team are really excited about, and it's kind of also see the opportunity there. So yeah, for us, like going through that accelerator and going through that exercise really helped a lot to come up with the common vision and the direction that we were all excited about and want to pursue.
Sounds like you're the Oprah of Lean Canvases, just Lean Canvases for everyone.
The co-founders, yes.
Yeah. So thank you. Final question. We often ask is, what is the AI industry going to look like in 1 year from now? And obviously, you don't have to be right, but the future is informed by the present. And so a great prediction is really informed by insights about the way the world is developing right now.
Yeah. I think we will see more open source, especially in 2024 a lot, for multimodal models. I think in 2022 November, ChatGPT came out, and no one in the community kind of knew what's happening there, what kind of technology was in there. But in 2023, lots of like open source efforts were made, and I think there are lots of open source models out there now that are comparable to GPT 3.5. GPT-4V came out and this year, and I think next year lots of open source community will be working towards what are some secret sauces there, and reproducing some of the key results there. And yeah, we'll just see lots of models coming out every 2 weeks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aidan, for joining us. Thank you, Stephen, for being my co-host for today. And all right, everyone, that's our interview with Aidan. Collective Nation, as we wrap up another episode of the podcast, I want to express my gratitude to our guests and to you, our curious and passionate listener. Today's discussion has once again illuminated the terrain of AI, offering us a rare glimpse into the mind shaping the field. We are building this podcast with the Gen AI Collective, so please reach out with any feedback or suggestions. If you'd like to be a guest on the Collective Intelligence podcast, please get in touch with us. Details for doing so will be in the show notes or description below. And if you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a review or comment on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for being a part of this journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning. Thank you.